It's Patrick McDonald, and today on the podcast, we're talking with Jovell. Feel me?
I feel you. What's good, man?
How you doing, man? Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so we've known each other for a while.
Yeah, we met shortly after you got here, I feel like.
We did. So I was looking back at the annals of history, and by that I mean on the Anchor podcast.
Yeah.
I did a long time ago, in November, actually, of 2017.
Wow.
And so I had done like a short podcast. Well, it was really just me recording into a phone and then publishing it to the Anchor platform about going to a market at Willowa.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, looking for art. I'm a very big fan of local art, connoisseur. Try to, deck out my apartment with art from local artists. And I had heard about you, and I wanted to go meet you. So I went to Willowa knowing that you would be there, and I walked around, or I picked up some art from Lucas Art.
Mm-hmm.
He's an illustrator.
Yeah, old coworker of mine.
Really?
Yeah. We worked at the Apple store together for a while.
Cool. It's a small town.
Very.
And then I went to your booth.
And I was not there.
And
I was gone. Yeah, I had to dip. I had to go take some photos earlier. So I think Brooke, who was Miss Alaska at the time, was manning my booth. Yeah.
And I was like, "Where's Jovell?"
Yeah.
I came to see Jovell. I was like, "I want to buy your pictures, but I want to buy them from you." And so that night I come home and I record the podcast and I put it out in the world. I didn't think anybody was going to listen to it.
Yeah, it was almost serendipitous how we found it, because I was talking to the Aquila guys about Anchor. Oscar had always expressed interest in wanting to do a podcast, and I have a friend who works over at Anchor, and so we were talking about it, and Oscar had already been on the platform a little bit, and so he was like, "Oh, cool," and we were poking around it, and he found you. I don't know if he was already following you or, but he listened to it, he brought it to my attention, and I was like, "Oh man, I gotta reach out to this guy," because I felt so bad that I wasn't there to meet you,
I didn't mean to call you out.
Oh, I deserved it, though. I am always okay with being called out.
Well, I'm glad you did reach out. And I believe a week later, literally, like Thanksgiving week,
Mm-hmm.
We were sitting down talking.
I think, was that the first time I came here, maybe?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe I went to the office first. We went to the office and Pilates in a little bit and back and forth. Yeah, that's what it was.
Right. You're a stranger. I didn't know you other than Instagram.
Yeah.
But no. It was all good, and I think we connected through Instagram and through Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Twitter is how I reached out to you and gave you my number. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So anybody listening out there, that's how you get a hold of Jovell. No. So yeah, it's been a while. It's been over a year.
Yeah, and you've done everything under the sun that you can in the city, which is awesome to see. It makes me feel like I am a bad Anchorage person. I'm like, man, I'm not doing any of the fun stuff Patrick's out here doing.
I mean, I feel like I don't do anything.
Oh, man.
I try. I would say that for the most part, a lot of my activities happen within 0.5 square mile radius of downtown.
But that's awesome to see how much is going on just in your area, I mean, I'm also downtown, and I'm home all the time.
Well, but you have a shop downtown, right? You have a space.
True. Yeah. So home for me is synonymous with the space, pretty much.
Live, work, play.
Yeah.
All of the above,
mm-hmm.
and everything else. And when did you move into that space?
This February 13th will be our 1-year anniversary of this iteration of being in the space. We originally rented the space for an art show back in 2015, I think it was, August 2015. Did that for a while, revisited the idea, revisited the space in early 2018. I guess I had started to pursue it late 2017. Some things didn't pan out, went back to the drawing board, then came back, hit it hard, and we moved in February 13th. Our first show was in April. This is the Aquila space that I'm talking about for anyone wondering. But, yeah, it's coming up on a year. I'm really excited, happy to see that we can make it last that long, and just excited to bring bigger and bolder ideas to the city.
I mean, big and bold and then some. Just in the past couple months or the past year, really it's been this emergence of a lot of artists or a lot of people trying to take over spaces and do interesting things with them. I remember when you first moved in February, and then, you know, you gave it some time. You were painting. Like, I saw all the behind the scenes on your Instagram. You all were painting and getting it ready, and then thinking that it was going to be just a pilot project, like 6 months, and then you were done. But I'm glad to see that it's lasted a lot longer, and how the understanding of the space keeps evolving and where you're trying to go with it. I mean, y'all are great because y'all just go. You just try things.
That's the goal. As long as we can keep the lights on, we want to keep trying things. We don't like to give a fluid definition of what the space is. I think the only person who maybe myself, maybe Mikey and Willie and Oscar too. We're the only people that truly know what we want to do with the space. But in terms of the public, we like to keep people on their toes. You know, it's like you know that this is a creative space. You know that this is an art space. You know that this is a safe space. But what's going to be going on in that space any given month is really, it's a wild card, you know. And we want it to be almost sort of FOMO inducing. Like, oh man, I don't know what those guys are doing, but I want to be there. I don't want to miss it. You know, that's what we want to try and do.
Yeah. And just to expand on like some of the people that you've already had in there. You've had artists, musicians, you've had sumo wrestling, you've had just a bunch of different off the cuff stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you finding these people?
It's just through networks in town, through shared interest in each other's works, what we're doing, and just conversations. You know, a lot of times somebody might introduce me or Oscar to somebody and say, hey, this is my friend. They do X. I think you two should meet. And those conversations, they're organic. We have a lot of fun, and we just feel it out. If it feels like a natural fit, then we go for it. One of the biggest things that we look for in Aquila space is this going to impact the community? You know, that my criteria is super straightforward for how we plan events and how we do things. The only things that I really look for are, is this going to impact the community? And are we going to make or lose money? You know, I don't mind so much if we lose a little bit of money. Not everything we do has to be for profit or for gain or this or that. As long as we make a lasting impression on the community, then that's worth it. You know, sometimes we do events that are more just hosting, you know, just like renting the space out, and there's not a lot of impact in that capacity, but that's also how we keep the lights on. So it goes back and forth. It's like, is this going to make us a lot of money to where impact is not the priority? Is this going to be so impactful that the money's not the priority? And finding a balance of hosting events that kind of go back and forth between that two, so we can keep doing the fun stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the balance. And do you think about how you're going to do things or what you're going to do? I know you're talking about the impact, and that makes sense to me. A lot of people, you know, define impact by money. And it seems like you're okay with if you don't make money.
Yeah. Well, the four of us who are involved in the space, we all have full-time professional lives. So in terms of keeping the lights on, we know that if need be, we can reach into our own pockets, and the space doesn't have to generate revenue for itself. But ideally, we'd like the space to at least keep its own lights on. That way, anytime we pitch in for something, it's out of love and not out of necessity. But impact for me, yeah, it's definitely more of a cultural thing. I want people to feel good about something, or feel bad. I just want you to feel something, you know? I don't want you to be middle of the road. I don't want you to be in the middle of the fence. I want you to walk away from something that we've done having a strong gut feeling about it, whether that is positive or negative. I just want you to feel, because there's so many things that we go through that don't really make us feel anything. You know, we're just kind of just ambivalent. I don't know if that's the word that I'm looking for, but we're just
apathetic.
Apathetic is better. Thank you.
Yeah,
I need to brush up on my dictionary words, but
I'm a thesaurus if you need it.
Thank you. Yeah, we go through so many things that just the joys are fleet. The highs and lows aren't really there. They're just bumps, and I want people to feel really big about something.
I think it's great. I mean, in terms of feeling something, and that being a driving factor. Explain, maybe I'm looking for like a creative perspective on what that actually means, because if I'm starting a business and I'm, in it because I want to support myself, I want to support my family, I want to somehow create economic development in the neighborhood, I'm looking at the dollars and I'm looking at, what's quantifiable, but feelings aren't necessarily quantifiable or tangible in the conventional way that we think about them. So I'm curious to know how you're not afraid to think about feelings being an impact, or, does fear even enter the equation?
I think nerves play a bit of a role. Because I don't always have nerves of steel. Before we do shows, I have my moments where I start to doubt, I start to panic. I think anybody who's creative and has been creative and self-sustaining for a while, you go through those ups and downs. But I also feel like the way that I quantify success, even though it doesn't seem tangible, I judge it by how many people continue to come back to Aquila Space. Are we having more people come out to the next event? Conversations that I have with people say, hey, are you involved with Aquila Space? Are you in this and that? It's social capital. It's how often people are speaking about us, how often people are reaching out to find out about the space, whether that be media or just one person who's interested. That's how I quantify it. I just look for interest. If we're not relevant, if we're not doing something fun, then nobody talks about us and we get forgotten. And that's just the nature of things. If you're not popping, you get left behind. So we just want to do things that keep the conversation going and bring up conversations that need to be had within the community, whether that be the creative community, the professional community. We just want to spark that conversation and get people talking. It doesn't always have to be about us, but if you can come to our space and see something that's going to open up dialogue between you and someone who you may not have met otherwise, then that's awesome. That's what I love to see. Building bridges and making connections. And the space is a great hub for that. We do a really great job of bridging, and I'm tooting my own horn, but I think we do a great job of bridging the professional world and the creative world and bringing those people who may not have otherwise ran into each other into one space and allowing them to have conversations that they may not have had otherwise.
Well, toot your horn too. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. And you're right. You are bridging the two different worlds, creative and professional space, in a way that I haven't seen in a long time, in a way that I think is unique to our neighborhood downtown and Anchorage, as far as I'm concerned. But there's other art spaces downtown. There's other art galleries.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now you're still trying to define Aquila Space, and you're open to what it can be, which is super interesting to me. But I want to go to a specific instance where a couple weeks ago, where you had a show. It was kind of some musicians came through, and you just kind of had like you've had a few musicians come through,
mm-hmm.
but this one in particular felt like what you're talking about, which was kind of if something's happening, you want to make it a special experience and get people talking and generate buzz. And this felt like one of those things. It was like a happening, right? When Nick Carpenter and Quinn Christopherson, they came through and they did a show.
It was real special to have those two, because aside from the music, just the stories that they tell in between songs as they go back and forth, their chemistry is just, it's something special for sure.
It was good. They were two musicians who were sitting like not in the front, the storefront side of the space.
They were back more in the studio side of things.
Right. Where there's a beautiful mural done by Ted Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Kim, who's this picture that I have on my wall. And it was like dimly lit. There was a purple haze.
There's like some stage lighting.
Yeah. And they were like sitting down just, on some small amps, and just, they didn't even have microphones. They were just singing out loud.
Yeah.
And you're right. They would take turns trading who would go on what song next. And they would sit back, and sometimes they would do duets or just kind of chill next to each other and just enjoy the music while it's happening. And then you're right, the banter in between was it was part of the whole experience. I was gonna say it was like a comedy special. In some ways it was.
Yeah.
But that for me was like, wow. Where are we? Are we in Anchorage, Alaska?
It's nice because, anytime you can come to an Aquila event, there's a chance that the space is not even going to be configured the same way as it was the last time you were there. So the first Fridays, those are more of the traditional art shows that we do. But if we're doing music, if we're doing a lecture, if we're doing a workshop, if we're doing a game night or a open projector night, the space is malleable. We can kind of build it out to be what we need it to be. It's a big white box. You put the essential things in, you take the unnecessary out, and we can continue to do that and reshape it every time we need to do a project.
Yeah. So Aquila Collective has been together for a while.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mikey, Willie, Oscar, and yourself earlier. How long have y'all been together?
Mikey and Willie have been together since the dawn of time. It feels like they met each other back in high school and have been buds ever since. I think the first one that I met may have been Oscar. I'm remembering loosely, but I met Oscar. I used to assist for his shoots back in the day, and he would pay me in copies of Lightroom, which was awesome because it helped me develop a whole lot. I met Mikey and Willie through mutual friends. A friend of ours, Carrie, had a photo studio. She was 19 with the photo studio, so we were like, oh, this is awesome. This girl's cool, super cool. And they had been kind of doing their thing on East Side, and my buddy Jay and I had kind of been doing our thing. Well, it was actually Young and I, but Jay was there when we met. We had been kind of doing our thing on south side of town, and small town word travels. So it's oh, these kids take pictures on that side of town. These kids take pictures on this side of town. And Carrie was almost her studio was neutral territory. There was no beef between us, but we were definitely interested in meeting. We're oh, these kids are doing stuff that we're interested in. So we all met at the studio, chopped it up, and became friends. And I used to come downtown more often, so I'd hang out with Mikey over at his old boss. His boss at the time was Clark Mishler, really well-known Anchorage photographer, just an OG in the artist community, or more on the professional side of being a creative. But Clark is just full of gems. So I'd come downtown, hang out with Mikey, and Willie would be there, and this and that. And then I started introducing them to my buddy Young, who you've also got some Young pictures in your place too.
Yeah.
And we all just started to click up. We formed our first little group, the Aurora Chasers, and we just go out and take photos of the Northern Lights. And then it spawned into this group chat on iMessage between the four of us, and I think my buddy Scott at the time. And it just morphed into the photo community that we have today. And from there, we started doing things. Mikey started Walk Alaska. Young and I started the hashtag Sharing Alaska and trying to promote Alaskan stuff and get more of our friends online to come up here and experience Alaska and hang out and see the sights. And we were a welcome committee of sorts. Anytime somebody would want to come up here, they would DM us on Instagram or email us and be hey, I want to come to Alaska. And we would always be yes, you're staying on my couch. I will show you around. Whether you were from here or from some other place, we wanted to be as welcome as possible to show that the community up here is tight. And from there, we started to, this is a long-winded story, I'm sorry, but
Please, go on. As long as you want.
From there, we were having a lot of fun. Mikey was working for Clark. I was working, I think, at ACS at the time when they still had their storefronts for sell stuff. Willie, I think, was at REI. We were all doing stuff. Oscar was kind of the group dad because he was the oldest one. He is the oldest one in the group, so he was always just oh, that's Oscar. He's the older guy. But somewhere along the lines, when I started to do more professional work, Clark had moved, and Mikey was looking to do more professional work on his own. We were pitching ourselves out for projects, whether they be social-based or just here in town. But what we ran into was sort of like a, oh, you're sweet but you're too young kind of thing. Like we were kids, we were 20, 21 years old, and even though our work, we thought it was of a higher caliber, and a lot of times it did hold up. Like I'll never discredit the work. Um, we were looked at as if we were not professional enough, not experienced enough. So Aquila Collective sort of initially came together as a way for us to disguise our age. I always reference there's a scene in the movie Little Rascals where they need to get money to rebuild their clubhouse after it burns down. So they get on each other's shoulders and put on a big trench coat and walk into the bank and pretend to be an adult. And I usually tell people that's how Aquila Collective started out. We were a bunch of younger kids who wanted to be accepted in the professional side of creativity, but we weren't really getting that time of day. And so we put together the website. All of the work on the website was the same work that we had submitted in pitches as individuals, but for some reason, when we put it under the umbrella of Aquila Collective, we started getting more responses. People were saying, "Oh, we love this. We'd love to sit down with you." And then they sit down with us and they see that we're the same group of kids that hit them up 2, 3, 4 months prior, and they were flabbergasted. They were like, "Whoa, you kids are really up to something." So through Willie's spearheading, Aquila Collective has kind of morphed into an agency of sorts. I'd say we're more on the management side of helping other creatives sort of bridge that gap and go full time with their endeavors. So there's a couple painters, a couple graphic designers, a lot of photographers and videographers that are under the umbrella of Aquila. And through helping them negotiate their contracts and orchestrate their deals, that's one of the ways we manage to keep the lights on. So Aquila Collective, the work that we do as Aquila Collective helps fund the projects that we do as Aquila Space. So when you come into the physical space, it's easier just to call it, like I just call it Aquila, But if we're getting technical, the front of this space is technically Aquila Space, whereas the back of the space is more like Aquila Collective. The back, if you ever go in there, that's usually where our office is and our studio is, and where we do more of the work side of things, whereas the fun tends to happen in the front.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would talk about the epistemology of, or your origin story of how you started and how where you are today. I just see the space as the natural evolution of all of the things that you've been doing. And what you figured out early on was a structure of banding together in safety in numbers. And it seems like you've taken that, and applied it to a storefront. And then so it feels to me like it's ingrained in your DNA in terms of how you work together and this idea of moving together, safety in numbers.
I think it just makes sense. Yeah. I meet a lot of people who prefer to go the lone wolf route, and that's their thing. I'll let them have that, but it's not for me. I always believe in acknowledging when others can help lift each other up. I've never been one to be like, I did this by myself, this is all me. It's like, no, it takes a village, like you build a good team, you keep people close who you feel good with, and you can build together and you grow together. The gallery itself, so when we did the pop-up a few years back, and that was super fun, got a lot of buzz, people talked about it for years, and we kind of felt bad. We're like, man, we did that, and we were young, so it was just a one-off thing, we're like, did it, whatever, on to the next thing. But people kept asking us, hey, will you bring that back? Will you do that for us? Will you this or that? And so we didn't pay too much mind to it. But then so at the beginning of 2017, I wrote out my goals, and I knew that I wanted to open up a gallery. I'd had some less than fun situations with like First Friday type stuff, and I'd seen some of my friends go through less than fun situations with First Friday type stuff, and some of the other places in town, unless your name carried a certain weight with it, it was hard to get a showing of your work, and that was a bummer, because I've always been of the mindset that the work should speak for itself. And yeah, if you become acclaimed for your work, if you gain notoriety for your work, this and that, that's all fine and dandy, but the visibility should go to whoever has got the work that deserves it at the time, So I've seen so many talented people be passed up because somebody else's name carried more weight, and I'm like, that's not too cool. And the places that these more developing artists end up, they're not spaces that are designed for the consumption of art. You know, I love when I go to a cafe for a First Friday, but I also feel bad because I'm standing over somebody's table while they're trying to enjoy their meal or their coffee, and I just want to look at the art. You know, there wasn't a lot of spaces where you can go and enjoy art without feeling like you're intruding on someone else's experience. And the people who go there for a sandwich or a coffee, the art is secondary to them. You know, it's more filler, it's background. And as a person who likes to do creative stuff myself, I'm just like, I wouldn't want that. If I was the person displaying my work, I would not want that. I want to be somewhere where the eyes are on it, you know, where people are starting commentary about it, where my work is meant to be seen.
Yeah, where it's a show.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, you know, as a musician, early on, I used to, you know, I was in the military and played saxophone, and we would just go to these balls and just play for officers and NGOs or officers and enlisted, and we would just be background noise, you know, music to be ignored by.
Yeah.
And so that sentiment rings true to me. Like, why, like, if you're creating art, if you're putting something out in the world, it's not something just to be, you know,
it's not just filler.
It's not just filler, not just something, to be like experienced as some ambient noise.
It's not for passive consumption. No,
right.
Like you want people to be invested in it. And I felt that we were missing spaces. We didn't have enough spaces that offered that sort of opportunity. You know, I think there's a handful, and there's more popping up, which I'm always excited to see. And I won't say Akila's not doing, I don't think we're doing anything groundbreaking. I think we're just trying to bring more visibility to a community that needs some exposure up here.
That's interesting that you say that. I've been tossing around this idea lately about innovation and groundbreaking and new. I think it's just common. I think innovation is common.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's everywhere. It's happening all the time, all around us. And really it's just about seeing it, about documenting it and tracking like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've just, you know, talking to you in these past 30 minutes, just learned is that you're very reflective, like introspective about what you've done. And you can go back and like, talk through what you've learned and how you've grown. And I think that's super valuable and how you're going forward. And I mean, even just a minute ago, you said that you went in 2017 and set some goals that you wanted to open a space, and then you did a couple years or a year later, or that year. And then, like, can you talk to me a little bit about like how you're able to do that, to keep this introspective mind? And
I guess it's just my nature has always been to observe, whether that's others or myself, and to take note. I don't think I've ever really been one that I don't have to get my hands dirty to learn a lesson. I guess like I don't have to touch the stove to realize that it's hot. You know, I can just kind of see that. So with Aquila, with my personal life, with all of this work kind of stuff, it's just a mixture of me touching the stove and seeing other people touch the stove and just keeping a record of that, you know. It just makes sense. Like, I don't know how to, it's intuitive to me. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything special. It just feels like that's what you do, you know. You try something, you document it, you make notes, and you don't give up if it doesn't work the first time, but you assess the notes and keep trying, you know. That's just been my approach to everything, you know. And I'm not going to sit here and act like every Aquila event we've done was a smash hit. Like, we've had a lot of busts too, you know, but that's what you do. You look at it, assess where it went wrong, put it back on the shelf, come back to it later, and keep it pushing with fresh ideas each time. So I don't know, in and out of Aquila, that's just been my mentality. You know, it's don't beat yourself up too much. And also not being afraid to revisit things. Like, even photographs that I've taken, I look at a photo that I've taken in 2014 and I'll try it again in 2017 to see if I've refined my skill set and if I can make it better. So a lot of people who know me on a more personal level, they'll say, like, if we do something at Aquila, they'd be like, yo, weren't you talking about that like years ago? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, and you still wanted to do it? So yeah, it's just been, it rattles around in the back of my mind, like constantly revisiting things and refining them to make them better and better each time. So who knows? You might see me revisit sumo in like a year or two, like the photo workshops, the Two Worlds lectures, like all these things. You do them, you look back, you ask for feedback from people in and out of your circle, and you try it again. You just keep doing that until it gets better and better.
Yeah, I think this ability to be reflective is linked to improvement for sure. I think that's how you get to know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And constantly revisiting old work, or going back and then trying to improve on these just the ideas you had, and a lot of the values you had. It's always different 5 years later, because you've grown and you have a different point of reference.
Mm-hmm.
You have a different understanding of the context around you and the relationships around you, and you're like, oh, it didn't work because like I wasn't this pedigree of an artist yet, or at least the perception of me being that pedigree of an artist wasn't developed yet. So what I did was I went and got a bunch of other folks, and together we created our own pedigree, and created a website, and now all of a sudden we're legit. So it's those things to me, like the way, I don't know if it's a creative mind thing. I don't know if it's just a growth mindset thing, where you give yourself the space and allow yourself to fail, and then learn from it, and then keep moving forward, moving on, and trying to get better and better and better. I'm grappling with like finding the creatives in Anchorage. I'm also trying to figure out if there's certain people that are influencers. Like, what is that dynamic here? I mean, I've only been here 18 months, and I've already recognized how small our town is. It's 300,000 people in size and population, and in geography, I think just the bowl is around 100 square miles. I could be wrong, but I think it is. And so that seems like a pretty big geographic area and a mid-sized city in terms of population. But the relationships here are something else.
Anchorage is the biggest small city you'll ever find. It definitely feels that way. In terms of finding creatives and seeking people out, there's always people doing something. There's always people that are doing something that you haven't tried or you haven't experienced, and what's the harm in checking it out? Doesn't mean you're gonna love it right away or this or that. Like, there's plenty of times that I'll support things that aren't necessarily my taste, strictly because I see how much passion that person is putting into it. And that, I think, more so than anything, is what I'm drawn to, is just, are you loving what you do? I don't even have to like what you do. I just like the fact that you love it, because we need more of that. We need more people who are stoked on what they're doing, And I think those people tend to gravitate towards each other. So it feels very small, but passion seeks out passion. And so these people end up finding each other.
Yeah, that's true. And now I'm reflecting back on when you said earlier, I'm always out doing stuff. Well, it's that thing. It's if you you want to see the interesting, you have to be interested.
Mm-hmm.
And then by becoming interested, you become interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Kismet right here. So yeah, there's this, like you said, there's a lot of things happening everywhere, and I know I can't capture them all the time. I try to capture them for downtown, because I want to show that there's more interesting things happening than not, right?
Yeah.
That's why I don't know. I'm mulling over this idea that innovation is just so common. We just have to see it and learn how to see it. So,
I think for me, a part of it too is just when I have conversations with people and they always say, "Oh man, Anchorage is this, Anchorage is that. There's nothing to do." I'm like, "There's plenty to do. You're just not doing any of it." So don't be mad at the city, because you're not getting out there and experiencing things. There's always things to do.
right.
And I always tell people, try things twice, because once isn't enough to really figure out if you like it or not. So just get off your butt, go do stuff. You get off your butt. You're hardly ever on your butt, And if I'm on my butt, it's only because I'm trying to plan stuff for people to do, for things to do. But I have noticed that in recent, I've been so occupied with like work stuff that I haven't made as much time to be truly creative or to have fun. And this recent year was the first year that I even started to accept being labeled as a creative, because I never thought that I was creative. I just think I think a lot, you know. I think that I identify problems or things that I deem as problems, and I look for solutions. And I take that same approach into my work. So I don't think I'm thinking of anything new. I'm just like, the problem is I don't like the way this picture looks, so I'm going to think about how to take a better one. You know, I didn't think that that was creativity. I thought that was just problem solving. But now that I've started to accept that label, now I'm kind of grappling with like, okay, how do I maintain creativity but still understand that on the back end the work needs to be done, and going back and forth with that.
Well, but there's kind of like a switch, right, in your brain that you're like, I need to go fix something and improve it, where you can literally make something new. You can create something new.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, is being able to know what your skills and your abilities are, and then being able to move and make something, right? That to me is, or create something. People that create things are creatives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of getting off your butt, it's really easy to make an excuse. There's nothing to do out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was years ago, just forcing myself to go to events. That's all my Instagram is. It's just events that I go to. I'm like, I need content, because I don't want to keep showing the same sunsets and selfies, which is, I think, minimum viable Instagram. Sunsets and selfies.
That's good.
That's good. But what else are you doing? Like, what else are you interested in? What else is interesting? So, in some ways, I used Instagram to help me go out and see things and prove that I was there, kind of like the YOLO type effect. But
well, because you wanted to share more interesting things, so you had to go and do more interesting, that kind of concept?
That kind of thing. And then also, it was inspiring. I was inspired by the city, by being in the city. You can't be in your house and be inspired by the city. You have to go out and feel things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get that actual first-person perspective in order to understand them. And so that is something that had to develop over a long period of time. And to the point where I realized that a lot of the experiences and the things that I am gravitating towards or to is interesting people.
Yeah.
Is our community and our neighborhood. I'm really fascinated with the downtown neighborhood, like almost infatuated, because it's so small and yet it always has such a big magnifying glass projected on top of it. And there's a lot of things happening here, but there's a lot of things happening everywhere else. There's so much development. I mean, Midtown is coming up like none other. Diamond, Muldoon.
Yeah. That's one of my goals this year, is to explore East Side more and really try to root myself, not so much as like a resident, but just let that community know that it's like, hey, I'm here and I want to hear your stories. I want to document. I want to be a fly on the wall. So that's, I don't know, look for that for me this year as a personal project. But yeah, there's so many communities sprouting up. And just being able to insert yourself, not in an obtrusive way, but just to tell the stories and to document, I would love that, Yeah,
I like that approach where you just wade in the water. Mm-hmm. You come in slowly, and you're not trying to make a big splash and disrupt everything.
Yeah.
For all the people that have been in the pool for a long time, who have gotten accustomed to and like their place, where you just kind of, like you said, be a fly on the wall and listen a lot, observe a lot, and then start interjecting, right? Like once you've been in the conversation for a minute, once you've seen some of the processes and understand the relationships and context of people, then start inserting yourself. I think, as a photographer, you're kind of trained to do that, right?
Kind of. I mean, it depends on if you've had training. Like I took one photography class. Shout out to Mike Conti But after I learned how to develop my own film, I stopped going to class. It was at 8:30 in the morning. I was like, this isn't for me. And Conti will tell you himself, if he remembers, I failed that class. Yeah, it's like the one photography class I ever took, I failed it. But again, that was because my nature is to learn what I desire to learn, and then get the hell out of there. It's like, okay, I don't need this anymore. And that's from my stubborn side. But I think that people who gravitate towards photography, at least more on the documentarian side versus the creative side, it's in your nature to be reclusive. It's in your nature to be more introverted and to not make a big splash. And photography allows you to participate without actually feeling like you're participating. You know, it's like, I remember a few years back, I went to a Crude magazine release party, and my camera ran out of film, so I didn't bring it with me. And I felt so weird being there, because without that camera as the buffer between myself and another person, I felt like I was no longer an observer and I had to be a participant. But I'm not trained to be a participant. I don't know how to do that, you know? So I think a lot of photographers, at least on the side that I align myself with, that training isn't there to be inserted into a community or try to make a splash. I think if you go maybe the more formal route or the more commercial route, then yeah, you're taught to be, because you're a salesperson too on that side of things. So you are, extroverted, you are friendly, outgoing, bubbly. But my side of the things is just like, no, we are quiet and reclusive. And even 3 years ago, you would not be able to get me to do a podcast. Like I was.
Thanks for coming on, by the way.
Oh yeah, no problem. And even before Aquila, I didn't like putting myself out there. I would only put myself out there so far as my camera would let me go. If I'm doing something that I felt was for the greater good of my photo process or my art making process, then I can saddle up and put myself out there. But for the most part, I stay at home. I don't talk to nobody. I don't do nothing like that.
Well, you said you like to think a lot. So
I do. Yeah.
You're an introvert.
Through and through. I think so. I think I can put on, if it has to do with Aquila or something that I am passionate about, my passion will override that introversion, and I will step up and I will do what I need to do. I will be that person. And I think that's what I'm running into now, is a lot of people who have met that person, and then they meet the more natural me, who's like quiet, and I'm just a jerk.
I mean, I don't. You're not a jerk. At least I haven't experienced you.
Yeah, we'll see.
As a jerk. Okay. Maybe I'll just hang out with you more. But to me, I respect introversion. It took me a long time to claim that as well, because I thought that there was, we had to be private and we were kind of like these emo kids or something. But really it just means being introspective.
Yeah.
And having to process what we learn quietly, versus being an extrovert, which you have to externalize everything and talk things out to process it. So, yeah, I like the thinking mind and spend a lot of time writing or trying to figure out what I know or what I've learned constantly. I think it's fantastic. I wanted to talk a little bit about the subject matter that you like to cover in photography, because you have a breadth, you have a range of a lot of things. You observe a lot of things. And can you go into where you started and how it's evolved? And
yeah, so when I first got into photography, it was I played football my senior year in high school, and a lot of the kids on JV didn't have somebody to record their games. So Young, who's one of my best friends, dude's like my brother. We can't get rid of each other. Young was filming the games, and we had always kind of messed around with cameras in his garage and all this sort of stuff. And so I had offered to help him film the games, but I realized that I didn't want to film the games. I was like, he does a good enough job of that. Like, I'd rather focus on taking pictures. So I would try to take pictures of these kids making like cool tackles and grabs and this and that, and just kind of fumbling through a camera and just having fun. It just felt fun. So that kind of morphed into me taking photos for kids off the field and they'd just be like, hey, can you take pictures of me doing this or that? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, try it, why not? And before photography, I've always been kind of a nerd through and through. So that's photography didn't feel like an art thing. It felt like a nerd thing because this was like a cool digital camera and there was something to learn about it. So I was taking photos of kids off the field. And at this time, I was maybe 17 or so. And I was not keen on Anchorage living. I was like, man, Alaska sucks, mountains suck, everything sucks, snow sucks. I want to be out of here. But then I was starting to get bored of the places that I was photographing people, which at the time was like, around cities or around like buildings and this and that. So I started hiking to try and find more interesting places to photograph subjects. And then I realized like, yo, this place is kind of tight. Like these mountains are cool, like all this sort of stuff. And so from there, I kind of fell deep into hiking and really enjoying it. And it just went from me developing a passion for hiking to Instagram coming out. And shout out to this girl I worked with at Best Buy. She was like, oh, you should get on Instagram. And of course I listened because she was cute. And I was like, oh, cute girl tells me to do something, I'm going to do it. Yeah. So I got on Instagram and I was stoked because I was also a streetwear kid. Like I was into street culture and California fashion and like New York stuff and like things that were rooted in like hip hop and skateboarding culture and just counterculture. So I downloaded Instagram and I realized that my favorite streetwear designer, a few of them were already on the platform. And I was like, yo, this is really cool because they were offering behind the scenes looks at their design process and how the t-shirts were made and like how they would come up with graphic concepts and all this sort of stuff. So Instagram at first was a platform that was really cool to me because I was like, I'm getting a behind the scenes look at some of these. And this is like, they had like maybe 60, 70 followers or something like that. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
The good old days.
Yeah. One of the guys just retired. He just closed down his shop and it's wild because I've almost every single day since sophomore year of high school, I've had something that he has made on me, whether it be a wallet or a hat or like a pair of socks or something. And he just retired. But yeah, before I was even sharing on Instagram, I was just using it as a platform to observe designers that I enjoyed and just see the t-shirts that were in my closet, see how they got made, and be able to watch it from start to finish. That was awesome to me. But now, or I guess not now, but back then, somewhere along the lines, I realized like, oh, there's people sharing photos on here. And so I just started putting pictures up. I didn't think anything of it. I think the very first picture I put up was a picture of my friend's dog, and this is when Instagram was mostly iPhone only, but I was a nerd. So of course I uploaded like, my very first picture was like a DSLR picture in 2011 or something like that. And as time went on, I had fun with the platform. And then there was a conscious decision, and this part of me is long gone, but there was a conscious decision where I was like, yo, this platform is fun. I want to be the biggest Instagrammer in the state of Alaska. Like in 2016 or so, I set out, I was like, this is my goal. So I deleted all my pictures. Like all the dogs are gone, all the food is gone, all the stuff is gone. And when I went back to the platform, I think I had 300 followers, and mostly friends. And I started making it my goal to go out and photograph something every day that I felt was worth sharing, and it felt really natural to have conversations with people on the platform because there were also other kind of nerdy folks and we were enjoying this and that. And if I saw a photograph that I liked, I'd show appreciation, like genuine appreciation. And if that led to conversation and discussing techniques or topics that we both enjoyed, then great. That was cool. But the conversations never started from a point of like, hey, I want to learn something from you. Yeah. It always started with just admiration for their work. And before I knew it, I think the highest my Instagram was, people give me a lot of credit for it now, and I always kind of brush it off because I don't think that they don't see the same side of things that I saw. But at its peak, I think it was like 78,000 followers on Instagram. Yeah. And that's when I made the switch. I was like, okay, and just like I mentioned earlier, I was like, I've reached this goal, on to the next. Like, don't stop. I do a very bad job of stopping to pat myself on the back or to smell the flowers or anything like that. I'm always just like, goal achieved, on to the next, goal achieved, on to the next. And so when that happened, in a backtrack a little bit, that was mostly outdoor lifestyle. That was just Alaska stuff, me hiking and going aurora chasing. Like, we did not sleep. I don't know how we found the energy. We would go. I was working at the Apple store for part of this too. If I got off work at 5 o'clock, we would be in Hatcher Pass by 7 o'clock, hitting Gold Mint Trail, which is roughly 18 or 19 miles round trip. We'd hit Gold Mint all in one night, back in the car by 7 a.m. to get me to work for 9 a.m. the next day. And I'd show up to work, my boots muddy from the hike, and I'd just toss on my Apple shirt and just be right back to it. And then that same night, we'd get out and head south to go chase the aurora. And it wasn't from a point of wanting to gain content to share. It was just like, that was just what we loved, you know? But once I had kind of achieved the goal of getting the audience, being at one point the biggest in Alaska, this and that, I was like, okay, that's cool. But now what does it mean? And I took a look at it and I was like, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, what's next? And that's when I kind of went back into my portrait self. And that sort of started because there was a photographer in town who was doing like boudoir pictures and this and that. And I had a lot of friends who would see their photos and they'd be like, oh man, that person looks so good. I wish I looked that good, or I wish I was confident enough. And that irked me because I didn't like to see my friends putting themselves down. It's like, you can appreciate something without having to put yourself down. You know, you can look at someone else's work. You could look at someone else in a photograph and have admiration, but you don't have to knock yourself down to gain that, you know? So one day I just told a friend of mine, I was like, yo, like, don't do that to yourself. Like, let's take some pictures. Let me show you that you can do this. Like, it's not that scary. And honestly, I was scared shitless because I had never taken pictures like that before, but I was like, yo, I don't like my friends feeling this way. So I photographed her, and then she was stoked. She shared that with some of her close friends, and then it became friends of friends, and then it just turned into that being more of my full-time gig, was like boudoir portraiture and just portraiture in general. And yeah, then that opened up like a different lane of photography for me. But all the while, the most interesting thing though is I've always kind of shot all this stuff. You know, I've always gone to do street stuff. I've always gone to do landscape stuff. I've always done product and lifestyle, and like I feel at ease when I have a camera in my hands. It doesn't matter what the camera's pointed at. I'm just happiest when I have a camera. But in terms of what people recognize or the work that people see, yeah, it shifts around a bit. But yeah, so after the lifestyle and landscape stuff, I got heavy into boudoir, and people were starting to come to me for that. And then I got burnt out on that, so I would switch back to landscape, and then I got burnt out on that, so I would go back and forth. And around this time is when I started doing photography full time. What
do you mean this time? What year? Or
this was, so the first time I tried to go full time with photography was probably 2014. I messed that up, went and got a job, saved up my money, and then 2000, maybe 15, late 15 or so, was when I was like, all right, I'm gonna pursue this full time. And that just came to, like, I started my job last week, my new job last week. So I had like a 3-4 year run of just being a full-time photographer or full-time creative, because it's easiest to put on the photographer hat, but you know, you do it all when you're freelance. You do whatever comes your way. But I started to find myself having a hard time balancing work with creative expression. And so a lot of the stuff that I was producing for work, it wasn't bad, you know, but it didn't make me feel any type of way. Like, it just, and like going back to what I said earlier about trying to elicit a feeling from something, I was creating work that was technically proficient and it made my clients happy, this and that, but I wasn't feeling anything. And that was a big struggle for me. It's like, yo, I'm using a camera every day. I'm living the dream, you know, but I don't feel anything. And it goes back to that same feeling I mentioned earlier of like, okay, goal accomplished. Now what's next? So yeah, through ups and downs in photography, that's kind of where that's taken me. But I'm super appreciative of all the brands and companies that I've had opportunities to work with, the places that I've been able to travel, that cameras have taken me. And I still love that, but I needed to get back to a point in my life where I could create strictly for the sake of expressing myself, just for fun, you know, and not to please somebody else.
Yeah, that's always the struggle, right? Is challenging yourself.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out where the next challenge is, or how, where you're going to take something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about the evolution from sports to landscape to boudoir to street and everything in between, and coming and going from the professional world, which now you're going to be back in the 9 to 5,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm excited to see where that goes.
Me too, man. Me too.
And yeah, we'll talk about that maybe on another podcast, but because it's still new, it's still fresh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you think about 2019? Where you're at now? Like, what are you hoping for?
I want to see Aquila Space grow and become more consistent. I'd like to get to a point where we can really hammer out our schedules, myself and the guys, and just be as consistent as I think we can be. I'd like to see myself sharing more of my work and sharing more of myself. I mean, in a situation like this, I don't shut up because you're asking me about things that I'm very passionate about, so I can go on and on and on. But I know as an individual, I can be pretty closed off and reserved, and I want to change that. I want to be more. I just want to be friendlier. I honestly don't think there's been a time where I've like offended somebody. If there is, they can let me know. But I noticed that I was kind of going back into my like reclusive corner, and I don't want that for myself. 2019, I want to be out there doing stuff like you, Patrick.
Jeez. If we want to psychoanalyze each other, that's gonna take another hour.
I want to see where I go with this new company, this job. Like, I'm stoked to be there. I'm happy to be a part of a team again after being, even though I played well with others, I was freelance. At the end of the day, I was looking out for myself. So I'm excited to work with a team and to have more access to entities that I've been trying to gain their attention for a while. I'm just excited to see what we can do and to foster creativity and to nurture developing creatives and artists that are coming up. Like, now that I'm getting a bit older and whatnot, that sounds weird to say, but now that I'm getting older.
You're so old, Jovell.
I know, man. 26 long years.
Jeez. Come talk to me in 10 years.
Yeah, but I've had a lot of fun. I don't think that I'm too old per se, but I want to try and transition into more of a role where I can help foster creativity and create a space for others who are developing. And when I use the term developing instead of younger, because developing is more true. You can develop at any age. You can be 40, 50, 60 and discover your passion. And I want to help foster that. I don't care how old you physically are. I just want to see you embrace your passion and your creativity. So I want to slip into more of a role that helps facilitate those kind of activities, so making things happen. I don't necessarily have to be the one doing the stuff. I just want to help make it happen.
Yeah, I would say that you've definitely been a model of making things happen. And so hopefully people can learn, from what you've already done, and just listening to you and talk about it and how you've done it. We're almost out of tape. So I'm just going to see if you had any last things you wanted to plug in about a minute here.
Yeah, I guess this is where every black guy does his shout outs, But,
go ahead.
But honestly, shout out to the people around me that keep me humble, that keep me in check. Willie, Mikey, Oscar, Melissa, Patrick, all these friends, Lauren, Christian, like all these friends, my dad, everybody who, and if I'm not saying names because I just have the memory of an old man, but there's so many people who keep me in balance and remind me to like always check in and see how I'm coming along with things. So I can't take credit for my success because I understand that it came from others, You always got to value the support of a team. In terms of other stuff, shout out to Raid City, Frozen Founders, all these younger guys doing stuff that's really exciting and fun to see. There's just so many pockets, I'm just excited to see all that come together.
Cool. And on that note, I'm excited to see it too. It's been a joy, Jovell, having you here.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Peace.